Namaste and good evening. I am Jagat Bahadurwali. I am from Rukum West. I am an MPhil student in English Education, second semester under Nepal Open University. Today I am going to present my presentation on why literary translation is a good model for translation theory and practice. First of all, I would like to present my presentation framework here. My presentation framework is like this. Literary translation, its meaning, language used in literary translation, cultural asymmetrics in literary translation, theorizing function and the semiotics of literary translation, decision making and metonymics of translation, literary translation and cultural systems, and at last, translation as a cluster concept. First of all, I would like to talk about the definition or meaning of literary translation. Literary translation is translating the fiction from the source language document into next language. Under literary translation, translating the books, articles, stories, and other types of prose, poetry, advertising materials come under. The main principle of literary translation is the dominance of poetic communicative function. Despite rendering information to the readers in literary translation, it also has aesthetic function. And the aesthetic image has an impact on the reader. It imparts some kind of impact on the reader. Likewise, the scope and the nature of literary translation usually make it a good model even for theorizing most facets of oral translation, namely forms of interpreting. Literary translation is a superb model for the aspect of translation theory. Now, I would like to talk about the language that is used in literary translation. Literary language is language writ large. It means it is rich and complex, exemplifying the full range of the linguistic phenomena and capacities of a particular language. Literary language tend to include both marked and unmarked examples of syntax and morphology. The vocabulary items that are used in literary translation are normally broad. Literary tropes like metaphor, simile, synecdoches, etc. are used in literary translation. Literary translation has a language which can be colloquial, visual, technical, or specialized. It is creative, innovative, and generative, and it includes the creation of novice words and unexpected sentence patterns also. Uh, now, now I would like to talk about theorizing function and the semiotics of literary form. Meaning is both language specific and conditioned by contextual relevance. It means in some cases meaning is language specific, but in some other cases it is conditioned or it is contextual. It is determined by the context where it has been used. In some cases, translation and their source language text have different meanings. It means the translated text may have slightly different message or meaning than the source language text. It may also happen in literary translation. Translation are sensitized to pay attention to shades of meaning, shifting in meaning both both literary text and their translation. One important aspect of meaning that has been explored and well theorized in translation studies is functional meanings. Translation practitioners pay much attention to the functional dimension of a source text in every type of translation and interpretation. In the same way, The intended function of a literary translation of a text from another period or culture often diverges from the functions of the source text in its original context. In some cases, the meaning of a text goes far beyond its linguistic and cultural meanings because the meanings of literary works are to a large extent structured by their diverse forms. In the same way, literary translation involves the translation of forms which itself involves semiotic transcending language and semantics in a limited sense and transcending cultural meaning in a circumscribed or material sense. Intersemitic translation is one of the most interesting features of literary translation. Uh, Now, I would like to talk about decision making and metonymics of translation. In literary translation, there are often multiple translation of a single literary source text either into the same target language or into a variety of target language. It is one of the examples of decision making nature of translating and interpreting. It means in literary translation or literary text you can have got multiple translation according to the situation, according to the what culture and so on. The translator make choices about what features of source text to prioritize and what features to omit or treat as secondary in such translation. It means in literary translation, the translator has freedom. He can omit some items. He can what treat some items as the secondary items. He can prioritize. He has got the what full authority to choice what features are important, what features are not important. From the decision making point of view, translations are metonymic process because they are always partial representation of the source text. Now, let me talk about literary translation and cultural system. How literary translation is culturally related. Text and translation are in turn embedded in larger social and cultural system, including patronage, economic, political, and ideological systems. General audiences and scholars alike have an established or intuitive sense of literature as a cultural system composed of subsystems. A literary translation largely constitute a definable corpus within a culture. Children are raised knowing the literature of their culture, even though they are usually aware that other people tell different stories. And the last slide that I am going to present is translation as a cluster concept. It is quite difficult to specify necessary and sufficient conditions that can be used to identify all translations across time and space. Translation is an open concept in terms of both its process and its product. Uh, in this way, translation as a cluster concept is perhaps most clearly seen in the widely divergent conceptualizations of translation in the varied languages and cultures of the world and in the widely different documented stories of translation internationally. This is all my presentation. This presentation slide have been prepared from the book written by Tomazko, Translation as a Force for Literary Revolution in the 20th Century, Shift from Epic to Romance, New Comparison 1, page number 1 to 16. Thank you very much. At last I would like to request all of you to provide me some constructive suggestions and feedback so that I could reform it in the days to come. Thank you very much.